Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy Looney, and we had a wild day today. Markets were all over the place, but my portfolio actually ended pretty flat. And the reason for this volatility is because we saw a 25 basis point rate cut by the Federal Reserve to 3.75 to 4%, and they actually provided hawkish guidance for the future. While this was going on, the government is continuing, or the government shutdown is still ongoing. So meaning key economic data is actually missing, which makes the Fed's job even harder. And then finally, we're going to look at my portfolio and a IPO stock that I'm looking to get into, and let's get into it. But before we get into it, quick shout out to the Discord. It is free to join. And I also offer a premium membership for $8 a month, and you get access to one-on-one coaching, trade callouts. I have an option selling course. I do giveaways and more. You can check it out. All the links are in the description. So let's actually pull up the Fed rate decision and what actually happened. Actually, we'll talk about it first, then I'll pull up a cool little chart that I noticed for the December one. But yes, the Fed did cut interest rates at around 2:30 p.m. by 25%. And if we look at it, initially it was kind of all over the place. It was going up, it was going down. There was no clear direction. Everyone was more concerned about what Powell actually had to say, not really the decision, because the 0.25% was essentially already priced in. So what they said about December, and we'll actually take a look at the December rate cut decision and how it changed just by today. So if we go to economics on Robinhood, and now if we go to Fed rate decision, we could see that on the day we saw that massive drop from the green one is the cut 25 basis points. It went from 85% close to 89, or I believe 89. What was the highest? The highest was 85%, and now it is trading at 67%. So that big drop was due to Powell actually mentioning that a December cut is not a foregone conclusion. So he's essentially saying that it is not confirmed that we're going to get an interest rate cut in December. And part of that is due to the government shutdown, and a lot of data is missing. The Fed is having to use different types of data to actually conclude whether they should cut rates, keep them the same, or hike them. But that is one of the reasons that the December, or just the overall market, kind of negatively was affected by this. And for me personally, I'm not entirely concerned. Yes, this is a concerning comment, but it could have been just a slight comment. I don't know how serious I want to take that comment, because overall, it seems like we are heading in quantitative easing. That is another thing they did mentioning. So yes, we are easing, but we're not rushing is kind of what the Fed is saying. So they're staying cautious. They don't want to rush into things. They need to see more data coming out. And they're basically saying they don't want to confirm that rate cuts are coming automatically without actually looking at data. So I think it's a very realistic thing to say, and it makes a lot of sense. So I'm not too concerned. There's a chance they still cut it, and there's still a chance they don't. So I'm prepared for any sort of scenario. So even though markets might have expected a big rally today, that uncertainty that came after where he spoke definitely tempers it. That's likely why we saw this volatility today. But somehow I actually finished pretty flat, which is pretty interesting, or relatively flat. So I also made no trades today, so that was worth noting. And another thing that we did see later today was that Google and Meta had earnings. I actually own Google. It's not a big position in my portfolio, but it did really well. It provided really good revenue and just overall beat and EPS beat and good guidance. Up 10% on the day, whereas Meta kind of struggled. I don't have any Meta. I used to, but I already made my profit on that, and I ended up selling it off. So didn't really affect my portfolio too much. Yes, it was down though. It was down today around 7%. So pretty interesting move from Meta. I think the big beautiful bill was affected this company. And yeah, I think it's just short-term volatility. I'm curious to see where it ends up at the end of the year. But we all know that rate cuts and rate cuts after all-time highs or near all-time highs is actually really bullish on the 1-year chart. So that's why I think short-term, this volatility should continue. And overall, October is a volatile month. My portfolio, you could see, pretty volatile. We were shooting up and down almost every week, and I'm still up around 3%. So although we're seeing all this volatility, some bad news, some good news, I'm still ending up green. So I'm just continuing my strategy. And I want to mention again, the government shutdown is still dragging on. And because of this, we have the data, it's delayed and just overall incomplete. So the Fed's eyes and ears are sort of blind right now. So when you combine this rate cut, missing data, market uncertainty, you get what we had today, a volatility with no clean direction. So that's why I stayed away from trading, didn't make any trades, and maybe this is an opportunity. I just buy every day. I buy crypto every single day. So I don't really necessarily care about short-term volatility. The other thing I want to talk about is an IPO, and it's an IPO that isn't really talked about much, and sort of the IPO things were dying off, or IPOs were dying off recently. So we have Navon, or I only bought 50 shares, and they are launching their IPO. Right now, the target is $24 or $26 a share. And again, this isn't like a long-term position for me. This is just a quick flip on IPOs, especially if you get that pre-IPO dollar value. Usually it is a good price point. So this isn't a play that I'm going to hold long-term. It is a travel expense software company. And yes, it is showing some strong growth, but I'm not entirely paying attention to all its fundamentals and just the future on it. I'm just simply using it as a trade. I'm curious to see if the entire market will affect this IPO, because we might see some more red in the coming days. But we can see my portfolio is pretty much flat across the board with stocks and crypto. Crypto actually ended up flat, which is pretty interesting. I know Bitcoin sort of dipped under that 110,000. Not sure if I should be too concerned about that because I buy every day, but it is worth noting. And I have this Webull position. We'll probably get assigned. Webull got hit pretty hard, and I'll get assigned that $12 mark. And then SoFi is one that I was talking about recently, and it had earnings, and I'm curious to see where it ended up. And it ended up red today, but everything sort of ended red today. So I don't really think that it was SoFi that was the issue. Riot was up today, which is pretty interesting. I didn't think it would actually be green on the day with what's going on. Mara also slightly green. And then there was one stock that actually struggled a lot today, and that is FI, and it was down 44% or 46%. And this is a really big company. So a move like this isn't a common thing. And I believe the reason is because they lowered their expectations or their guidance for earnings and revenue and just overall outcomes. So a lot of volatility with this stock. I'm not invested, and I don't plan to invest into it as of now. I'm simply sticking to my positions, managing them. I have some option plays. I have some stocks and crypto that I'm just simply holding. So just to summarize everything that went on, we did see that volatility today. We saw red, then we saw green, and then somehow my portfolio and kind of the rest of the market finished sort of flat, depending on what you're invested in. If you're invested in Meta, unfortunately, you were on the bad end of this. But we did get the rate cut news, which we already sort of knew, was already priced in. And yeah, there's some data gap, there's some data missing. So curious to see how that affects the market and just the government being shut down overall. And the last thing is the IPO. The IPO of Navin, not a big position, not a long-term play, just a quick flip and just trying to take advantage of a trade. So markets, I wouldn't consider are broken. They're kind of just digesting, and that's fine. So what I'm doing, just staying patient, staying strategic, and I'm not chasing any noise. Until next time, peace.